Well, it is 12:30 here at the North American Bear Center, which means it is time for our live bear broadcast program. We're coming to you live in Ely, Minnesota, home of the North American Bear Center. And we do have a special announcement today. Currently, although Tasha's not super willing to leave her personal habitat, we do have all three bears in the main habitat. We just let Lucky Bear out into the main habitat. Tasha and Holly have had free reign of the main habitat all morning, although Tasha has been very keen on being in for the tours and for seeing the guests and getting some bear food. Lucky, however, has just been released as well, so we're hoping to get all three out into the main habitat so they can get over their differences and live together harmoniously in the main habitat. For those of you who have followed along and supported us for a long time or from the beginning, you know that Tasha and Lucky don't necessarily get along. It's not really Tasha's fault. It's Lucky who's the issue, which is super unnatural because in the wild, a male bear will most likely not be picky about the females that choose to give him the time of day. However, Lucky Bear, our 17-year-old male ambassador bear here at the center, is picky. And now he actually is just now passing Tasha in her private habitat while Tasha's in it. So now they're currently in the private habitat together, and we'll see how this plays out. But we really want these two bears to get along so that we can have them all out together. And actually, they're approaching one another, and it seems to be okay right now. Sharon, our head bear curator, is right next to the fence with them. She's getting some pictures and videos of them interacting, but so far, so good. Again, in the past, these two have been pretty aggressive with one another, mainly Lucky with Tasha, and we really want the bears to be out in the main habitat as much as possible together. And if you know, again, from the past, we usually rotate Lucky and Tasha with Holly into the main enclosure, and that's worked okay. But again, it would be much more ideal if we could just have all the bears out together. And so currently, the two that don't get along are in Bear Den 1. And so if you're looking on the pond cam, you can pan over to Bear Den 1 and see them both, but you can also view them on the mound cam as well as Bear Den Cam 1. So they're being able to be picked up. You probably can only hear the broadcast, though, on the pond cam. So if you switch, you will lose the audio, just to let you know. Lucky has made it in, and now he's left. Tasha kind of watched him the whole time, and now he's down front, or heading down front. So that's really good, actually. Now as soon as he left, Tasha used the barrier of the fence for some confidence and did a little bit of a bluff charge and slapped the ground, and she also gurgled at him and did a blow. That's not the most promising thing, but we also know Tasha does have way more confidence when she's behind the fence than when she's out with the bears, but obviously that would have been a little better if she just didn't vocalize or kind of react whatsoever. We did put a large amount of food out. That was by design, so if you're looking around the main habitat down front in the window viewing area, you'll see lots of food items. When we introduce the bears like this, we want to make sure food is not something they can get in an argument about. So we want to make sure they're inundated with food, so to say. So we put a large amount of food in there, and that is, again, just to make sure that if there is some contention, it has nothing to do with a food resource. All animals will typically defend food resources, and they can do so quite aggressively. So we don't want our bears fighting over food and making unwanted problems between them. So, again, we were sure to put in large amounts of food. So if you look around, you'll see some iceberg lettuce, some carrots, as well as our general spread, which is a nut medley of pecans, hazelnut, walnuts, peanuts, and almonds, as well as Brazil nuts and some macadamia. And then there's also some dried fruit in there like cherries, cranberry, apricot, pineapple, and dates, and a few other things as well. So again, we just want to make sure that food isn't something they can get in an argument about. So we've also took the time to broadcast it far and wide. And so there's not like a super concentrated area of food. There's a even mixed spread all throughout. That'll hopefully encourage not only the bears to forage, but again, not argue over a food resource. We don't want to contribute to them arguing over something like that. Now, Tasha is choosing to stay in her personal habitat, although she is making the round towards the gate, and we will see her hopefully come out. Again, when the bears are in the main habitat, we don't force them to do anything they don't want to do. So if they want to stay in their personal habitat and not come out to the main enclosure, that's their prerogative. If they want to come out and hang out and be in view of the guests and show off those cool bear behaviors, that's great too. But when, again, they're in the main habitat, we don't want to force them to do anything. And also, let's just be clear, we couldn't. Lucky over here, he's our biggest bear, and he's currently right around 400 pounds. If I wanted him to do something specific, I couldn't make him if I wanted to. And again, we wouldn't do that. But if I wanted Lucky in for, let's say, we need some construction done, it's really up to him. We can encourage him by giving him treats and rewards for listening. However, if he really ultimately chooses he's not going into his private habitat, well, then the construction workers aren't going to work on the habitat with the bears out, and so we don't get to do construction. So it really is up to the bears. We often joke and say that we're on bear time here at the North American Bear Center because, well, we want projects to get done by a certain time. It's really ultimately the bears that decide when and how that gets done. So you can see, if you look over beyond Lucky, Tasha is starting to make her way down front, and she's very cautious of Lucky. Again, that's normal for these two bears, but in the wild, again, a male is not going to be aggressive towards a female, especially this close to mating season. In the bear world, in the black bear world specifically, it's a matriarchal system, meaning the females are dominant over the males. Now, in captivity, things get a little bit different. And so Lucky, he's been in our facility here at the North American Bear Center since 6 months old, and he's 17, meaning he's been here for 16 and a half years. This is mostly what he knows. All right, so he didn't get the chance to learn how to be a proper bear in the wild, which is part of the reason he's here. All of our bears have had some kind of interference in their life when they were young, and they have been deemed unreleasable. Our facility doesn't make that determination. Another facility does, a rehab facility or a state agency typically does. But then the bears they get two options if they cannot be re-released into the wild. One of those options would be being put down or euthanized. The other option is finding a forever home, a facility like ours or something similar. So we are set up to care for bears that otherwise can't be bears out in the wild. And so these bears, again, are in that particular scenario. Now, being a wild bear, if let's just imagine Lucky was, again, he's a pretty big bear. Now, what females are looking for, because they do choose their counterparts, that's what makes it a matriarchal system. They're looking for good genes. Basically, if you're a male bear and you have good genes, you're big and strong. And so they do show that off by fighting other male bears. They want to show to the females they have good genes and showing off that strength. And so the males will actually engage in rather aggressive fighting. In fact, we've recorded males killing the other combatant in that fight. So it does happen. They get that aggressive. We've even seen bears get their ears ripped off, eyes poked out, or have limbs that don't work properly after those fights. And so actually, believe it or not, that's one of the biggest differences between Lucky here in captivity and a similar sized and age 17-year-old male in the wild. He's actually much better looking. That's because he has health care here, right? And so we give the bear supplements to make that coat extra fluffy and shiny. He also doesn't have to fight other male bears because he's our only male here at the facility at the moment. And so it would be really rare to see a 17-year-old male out in the wild and not show some history of those battles. All right, so you're looking for scarring, bald patching, all around the face and muzzle specifically, because, again, that's where a lot of the action of those fights take place, but also just bald patching around the fur. Again, there's challenges in the wild our bears do not have to deal with. They never have a hard food year. Some years we have a relative drought or a dry year. The wild berries, the wild nuts, all the other wild crop, they don't produce as much. That can be hard year for a bear. They also have a hunting season they have to deal with in Minnesota. Every single fall, they got to make it through hunting season without getting hunted. If you're lucky, you're a 17-year-old male, you're an ideal candidate for any hunter. That's a beautiful bear. That's something they would certainly like to hunt in terms of what they're looking for their ideal piece of game. And so Lucky is going to have a more challenging time getting through a hunting season than a smaller, younger bear might, in at least one way, in that he is ideally sought after. And so they have other challenges, too. If you're a female bear, you're reproducing and caring for cubs. Our bears do not reproduce here at the North American Bear Center. And from an energy perspective, reproduction is extremely costly. So our bears don't have to worry about that. And, again, it allows them to just have not be concerned about those types of things. And so because of that, they live much different lives than what you would expect in the wild. We still want our bears to have as natural life as possible, but within reason. So, again, the main reason our bears won't be reproducing is because we do want to save the space here at the center for more bears like Lucky, Holly, and Tasha. Again, if we had to say no to these bears when it came time to give them a home, they most likely would have been put down. And so if we allowed them to breed, we'd quickly be overrun with far too many bears, and we'd have to say no in other situations where there are bears in need. And also, black bears, American black bears here on this continent, they're doing just fine. In fact, they're doing really well. And here in Minnesota, they're expanding. And just about every part of their range in North America, they are expanding. So they don't need a captive breeding program to help bolster wild numbers like the giant panda or some other bear species could certainly benefit from. There is just no reason for that. And currently, as it stands here in the United States, if a black bear is born in captivity, it has to remain in captivity for the rest of its life. All right, so again, we don't want to unnecessarily add to this captive population. Yes, we're happy to be the caretakers in the homes for these bears for the rest of their lives, and we certainly enjoy guests coming to learn about them and see how they behave. But again, we don't want to unnecessarily add to this. Now, Tasha has made a second appearance. You can see she's being extremely cautious of Lucky. Again, that's just because there's a history there. They don't tend to get along. Now, it might also surprise you to learn that when our females do go into heat, because they are not fixed like Lucky is, that's how we ensure no baby bears or cubs will be produced here. Lucky is neutered, but the females are intact. So when they go into heat, they very much want to mate. Tasha, even though knowing Lucky does not like her, she will spend about the 2-week period she's in estrus up against his fence, coaxing him out, leaving scent signals that she is receptive and wants to mate. And Lucky meets those signals and signs with aggression. He charges the fence. He gets all blustery with her. He slaps the ground. He gurgles at her. That's not how a male bear in the wild would react. A male bear in the wild would be psyched about the opportunity to reproduce, no matter which female bear approached him for that opportunity. So again, things just get a little bit different here in captivity. This is what does happen when animals are not allowed to live out their natural lives. So just a little bit of background. Lucky here was found as an orphaned cub near Madison, Wisconsin. Now, Wisconsin actually has a lot of bears. They have more wild bears than Minnesota has. They just don't typically show up in Madison. And so it was quite an anomaly. We actually don't know specifically what happened to him. He could have been a pet that was escaped. He could have just been something happened to his mother, and he was never reunited with her. They're not really sure. But regardless, he was approaching people readily and looking for food. And so at first the DNR said, nobody touch him. His mother's around. She'll come get him. Well, after about a week or so, it was pretty obvious something must have happened to Mom or she wasn't coming back. And so the DNR did pick him up. And they initially looked for a home for Lucky, which they could not find. And so the DNR cannot care for every orphan animal that gets turned in, even if they're as cute as a black bear cub. They have resources and stuff, but it's not meant to care for orphaned wildlife. And so he was actually set to be euthanized because they could not find a home for him. We called the day of his appointment, shortly before they were going to start that procedure. We said, we have space for him at our facility here in Ely, Minnesota. We'd like to take him. And they said, good thing you called when you did, because, again, he did have a time and date set to be euthanized. And so we say that he is very lucky to be here, and we are even luckier to have him, and that is where he gets his name from. Tasha over here, she's a bear from Kentucky, so also not from Minnesota. She's a long way from home, and she was also orphaned at a young age. We do know what happened to her. Her family tried to cross the road when they were young. The mother was struck and killed by a vehicle, and the cubs just kind of hung around their mother because in the wild, they typically spend 16 to 17 months with their mother before she gives them the boot, or they choose to leave and go to establish territory and home ranges of their own. And Tasha was only 6 months old at the time. And so her and her siblings just kind of hung around. A passerby decided, I'll be the mama bear and I will raise them. He had a 50-acre farm in Kentucky where he took Tasha to. That's actually a pretty good setup for the bear. Now, because she was inexperienced, she stuck around, and also because he had good food, and he had 2 dogs that she was rather fond of. And so she did hang around and for quite some time. And about a year and a half, he decided he was going to let her go. And so he did so, and he released her at the local state park. Tasha immediately went to the campground at the state park and started visiting campers, which freaked them out. So they in turn called the authorities. The authorities showed up to deal with the nuisance bear that was Tasha. And during this whole period, the gentleman who had raised her had heard about it, drove back down to the park. He called Tasha's name. She came out of the woods, jumped into his pickup truck, and they went back home together. Obviously, that's not a good scenario. So the authorities did follow him home, and they confiscated Tasha. Believe it or not, there are 7 states you are allowed to have pet bears. Kentucky's just not one of those states. And so she was confiscated. Now, typically before they come to us, they do go to a rehab center. That center is in charge of getting them back out into the wild to live wild, normal bear lives. In the case of the 3 ambassador bears that live here at the North American Bear Center, they all failed that process, and that's how they are deemed unreleasable. Now, actually, this is probably one of the best progresses we've had between these 2 bears. They're about 20 to 30 yards from each other, and they're eating peacefully, not really paying any mind. You can see Tasha's in full relax mode as she is completely sitting down on that nice large behind that she has. She's got her legs sprawled out. She's very comfy. Lucky's not sitting now, but he is focused on the food in front of him, and he has apparently no interest in Tasha. That's actually really good. A lot of times in the past, these 2 bears probably couldn't be this close without being anxious and vocalizing to one another. So this marks progress, believe it or not. Now, this could also change very quickly. If Lucky decides he's had enough food and wants to chase Tasha or have some words with her, he could head over that way. However, we do know that Lucky is by far our slowest bear. They say the leanest of bears can run about 30 to 35 miles per hour. All of our bears are a little bit on the chunkier side of things here at the Bear Center, so we know they're not getting up to 30 miles per hour at the Bear Center. Now, we do have yet to see Holly. Now, as of late, Holly's been coming around only once or twice a day. She hangs out in the back of the main habitat in a day bed, or that's what we call it. Any location a bear chooses to hang out during the day and sleep or nap and just kind of rest, we call day beds. And so Holly has found one, and she has been at it just about every single morning, and that's typically where we see her throughout the day. She'll usually show up to one of the programs in the behind-the-scenes area to get some food, and then she's off and about. Now, the bears don't only eat what we give them. They're also able to forage on the natural foods in the enclosure, and they actually do prefer those natural foods over the stuff that we feed them. We somewhat test this regularly here at the center. Ely, Minnesota is pretty awesome in that we have wild strawberries, blueberries, and raspberries growing like weeds up here. They're rather abundant. And so one of the tasks on the staff is to collect good wild food for the bears, and we'll go do that. And then we'll give them some of the store-bought strawberries we got that morning and give them the option. Do you want the store-bought stuff or do you want the stuff we picked in the morning? Take a guess at what they choose. The natural stuff, right? And there's a reason for that. It's natural. They've spent thousands of years evolving alongside those foods. Their body specifically is designed to handle those foods. And I don't know that if any of you have gone wild berry picking, but you may have found the same thing that a lot of us have found. Although they're smaller in the woods, you don't get as big of a payout in terms of the size of those berries. The wild strawberries in this area are pretty tiny, usually about the size of a thumbnail at the biggest. But the ones at the grocery store are far bigger. However, if you taste both of them, most people do notice the wild ones taste significantly better. All right, and that is the trade-off there. So the bears seem to know this as well, as again, they do prefer those natural foods over those store-bought ones. Now the two bears, Tasha and Lucky, are rather close. And again, they're just going about this foraging behavior. And that's exactly why we did the spread in the way that we did, as I explained at the beginning of the broadcast. We put an absurd amount of food out so that if there was an issue, the issue between the bears would not revolve around food. Being very food motivated, bears are known for food defense or resource guarding. They will get angry and aggressive with other bears in the wild, as in captivity, about those food sources if they're not well fed, especially if those food sources are in limited supply. And so by design, we threw a large amount of food out to make sure that these two, when they were down here, if they did have an issue, again, it wouldn't be food related. And so there is plenty of food, and there will undoubtedly be more than they can actually consume. And you'll see the other critters are starting to show up to take advantage of that. So all kinds of birds show up, specifically the blue jays and the gray jays are also now called the Canada jays. Will come in and grab stuff. We'll also have squirrels, chipmunks, and groundhogs that regularly show up and steal some of the bears' leftovers. Because of that, we have some of the fattest chipmunks, squirrels, and groundhogs you have probably ever seen. All the animals that come and go from the main bear habitat typically eat pretty well. Now, we do weigh the bears regularly to keep track of their weights and their health. We weigh them weekly. There's a bear scale just below the deck. It's a big brown box sitting on a freight scale. In the front of that box, there's a feeding trough. You sprinkle some food in there. The bears are happy to get up there and get their weights taken. And actually, a black bear, on average, will lose 18 to 22% of its entire body mass through that winter dormancy period. So about a fifth of their entire body weight they gain and lose every year. Right? So Lucky here, he gains and loses just over 100 pounds a year, and Tasha here is right about at the same point. And so that's quite a significant weight loss and gain. That's one of the reasons why the scale, the readout, is inside so the bears can't see it. That way they won't get self-conscious over the course of the year with all that weight gain and loss they're going to go through. We don't want to be body shaming the bears by any means. And so it is a natural thing for them to gain and lose all that weight, and so we encourage that. And when our bears go into their winter dormancy, or that hibernation or torpor at the end of the year, we do not feed them. And so they'll go in, depending on the bear, right around October or November, and then they won't get any food until late March, maybe early April, again, depending on the bear. And that's what they're designed to do as well. So that's why they spend all spring, summer, and fall eating copious amounts of food, is because they won't be doing that for our winter. And our winter here in the Northland can sometimes be 6 to 7 months long. And so efficiency is the name of the game in the summer for these black bears. Eating is really all they care about. I noticed some of you pointed out the woodchuck that just appeared and then disappeared in the cave. This might also surprise you that our bears are actually scared of the woodchuck. And so we call them Chucky, but it's actually a female because the last few years they've produced kits. That's what you call a baby woodchuck or a pup. depending on where you cite your sources. But that's a female, and she does produce every year. And actually, if you look just to the right of the big den entrance, you'll see her face coming out. She's patiently waiting to get after some of those leftovers the bears didn't get. There's also a red squirrel there who's a little more daring, and that's probably because they are a bit quicker than the groundhogs. The groundhogs aren't very fast, so they usually wait till the bears are gone before they venture out into the main habitat. Now, those things used to be called whistle pigs. Some places in the United States and Canada they still are, and they're called that because they emit a very high-pitched, loud squeal as an alarm call. That's what the bears don't like. And so occasionally what we'll do is we'll throw a handful of food into one of those caves right there, and the bears will crawl in to grab it. But sometimes what we'll notice is they will come running out of there with that woodchuck at their heels, and he's making that loud, high-pitched squeal. Black bears hate loud noises. So thunderstorms, for example, all of our bears are not big fans of. And so what you'll see is they'll hide during those times, but they'll grab a few pieces of food. The woodchuck gets mad that it's in their home, and they'll come running out of there. And so even though it's small and the bears could probably end it with a simple stomp, they are typically pretty scared of it. And they will readily run and flee from Chucky the woodchuck. So I'm just going to throw out what we call the trolley feeder over here. Because there's so much food in the ground, I highly doubt the bears are going to go ahead and climb for this. They're very good at cost-benefit analysis. They won't do any kind of activity that requires them to get food unless they're going to get that same energy back. The only exception to that is mating. Any animal will risk some energy and potentially their life to mate because that's the overall goal in the wild. But here at the Bear Center, again, they'll always go for what's easiest, and we do see that in the wild. Bears are very much creatures that are somewhat lazy if you want to get down to it. All this food on the floor is so much easier in terms of energy expenditure to get than it would be to climb this tree, right? And even though the payout's pretty big up there, it's not nearly as easy in terms of just foraging on the ground. Question? I'm going to take a brief pause. I do have a few folks out here on the observation deck with me. And I'm just going to see if any of our guests have any questions they'd like to ask. How many bears can we accommodate here at the North American Bear Center? That's a great question. So we have licensing and permits through the federal and state government. Technically speaking, both of those permits allow us to have 11 bears. However, we would never put 11 bears in this particular habitat. It's just not big enough. We do have more land on both sides of the highway, and so we do have future plans to potentially build more habitats and separate bears and be able to grow in that way. But ideally speaking, again, these bears come from usually pet homes or something similar. Hopefully, people come here and learn why you shouldn't do that, and we won't have too many bears to have here in the future. However, you know, people are people. A lot of times this is done with good intention. They just don't know what they're doing, and then they create a bear that's not wild. It's also not tame, and it's somewhere in the middle. And that's what we're set up to care for. So we could take 11. I would say our personal capacity for this particular habitat would probably be 5 or 6. But, again, that's kind of off the cuff. If all the bears got along and everything was happy, you know, we could potentially have more than that too. But given it's about 2.5 acre main habitat, you know, having more than 6 would seem to be a lot. But we have consulted other facilities, including other sanctuaries in the Minnesota Zoo, for example, to get some better ideas on what we could have for capacity. And a lot of it is dependent on the bears and then how we care for them. So it's kind of variable. That's a great question, though. Thank you. Any other questions from our guests out here on the observation deck? All righty, so there's our first interaction. I know those of you tuning in live on our cam can't hear that, but we just had a little bit of some gurgling exchange between both the bears. This is about the closest they've been. You saw Tasha maybe do a quick jump step. She was ready to flee. She wasn't going to stand her ground and fight there, but then Lucky stopped and continued foraging, and so she felt comfortable to do the same. They are inching closer and closer, and so we'll see if they can, again, continue this peaceful foraging. But again, this is exactly why we did what we did. This allows the bears to at least get close to one another, realize that, again, maybe Tasha thinks, oh, Lucky's not so bad after all. I can be this close and we can be fine. Maybe vice versa for Lucky. He does keep looking over there, and he doesn't seem to care all that much. That's actually a really good sign. While we've been talking, you can see there's a blue jay raiding the platform nest. Sometimes they're fun to watch because they can actually hold an absurd amount of food. They have a small pouch actually located in their throat that they can fill up. And now that bird is going to go ahead and go find a spot to stash a lot of that. They'll regurgitate it and hide it in a nook in a tree or something like that. But they are our biggest pillagers of the bear food. They're so fast the bears can't really catch them. Occasionally we do have a chipmunk or squirrel fatality here at the Bear Center. I've been here for about 7 years now, and I have seen my fair share of squirrel and chipmunk fatalities. What will happen is we'll offer a big pile of nuts to one of the bears. One of those dumber or braver chipmunks, depending on how you want to define it, will approach and steal from the bears. Just as I explained earlier, bears will guard their resources, especially their better ones. And so although I've seen many pancake chipmunks at the result of a bear squishing them, we've never seen one of our bears actually eat the chipmunk. They'll just take the peanut back that it stole. So that's, again, what we call a food defense behavior or resource guarding. They're not interested in it as a food resource. They just want to make sure that their food isn't being taken. So they're very similar to humans in that way. They do not appreciate being stolen from. But if you think about it, it probably does help the chipmunks population in the long run. The slower, dumber ones get killed. The smarter, faster ones live on to reproduce, creating more smart and fast chipmunks. That concept is known as Darwinism, or survival of the fittest. Well, folks, as far as the North American Bear Center is concerned, I'm going to go ahead and write this down as an absolute success. It's been a long time since we've had these two bears out this close quarters together and not had issues between them. So as far as the staff here is concerned, this seems to be an awesome and overwhelming success that we can have currently all three bears out. Now, Holly hasn't gotten to the mix. It'll undoubtedly look a little different if she were to come down because, again, she behaves much differently than these two bears, and she is the matriarch. So everything you see in this habitat is all Holly's. Not only is she the matriarch, but she also likes to regularly remind the bears who the matriarch is. She does that by chasing around and smacking them around if she needs to, but oftentimes all she has to do is give them the look, and they'll turn around and the other two will go the other way. That is because, again, she's our oldest female, which gives her dominion over everything you can see. That's how it works in the wild as well. The oldest females control territories. They regularly defend them from male bears and other females. And so Holly is the matriarch here. She sometimes even feels the need to remind the staff of who actually is in charge here. And again, that would be Holly Bear. We like to joke and say she rules with an iron paw because she has very little room for misbehavior in the other bears. And when she sees it or identifies it, she seeks them out and she corrects it pretty quickly. And so, again, she graciously allows these other two bears to live here. But these two bears, they don't have a home range. They don't have a territory. They live in Holly's. And so we'll see Tasha here. She'll stomp out a little corner of the main habitat for herself sometimes. Once Holly finds it, she's quick to stomp it back out for herself and then go find Tasha and remind her why she is the matriarch and Tasha isn't. And so that might look a little different if she were to come down. Or if one of the bears were to go to venture off and find where she's at in the main habitat. You might see some chasing. You might see some playing. You might see some arguing. It all depends on that specific interaction. So we're excited to see what happens for the rest of the day. For those of you tuning in online, make sure to stay on those cams. We have various cams around the main habitat. For those folks here at the center today, if you haven't heard, again, we do have a lot of those live cams. And so feel free to check us out online. Our website has to be one of the easiest websites to remember, bear.org. All right, so really simple. You can usually find a bear in there somewhere on one of the cams, and it's just fun to tune along. If you folks want to come down this way on the observation deck, Lucky's going to stand up, and he'll be right under your feet here, and you'll be able to get a pretty good look at him, and he'll usually kind of interact when people say his name. So feel free to stand right there. Just be really careful with those cell phone folks. They do fit right through the cracks of the deck, and the bears have been known to crush them if they make it in the enclosure. I'm just going to sneak by you folks real quick, but feel free to watch as Lucky feeds out of that stand-up feeder. All righty. Well, I know this has been a long broadcast, but I'm going to go ahead and start to wrap it up for you folks. Again, we're really happy with the results here. We're going to go check in with the staff, have a little meeting, and see what the notes were about and what we recorded. I know we got lots of good footage and pictures. So, again, really, really good. We're happy with the Bears, and they did really well. So that's awesome. Thanks to those of you tuning in online. Again, we'll do this program on our live cams at the Bear Center every Wednesday at 12:30. So tune in throughout the summer to see more bear action and more broadcasts. We also have live broadcasts on Facebook every Monday and Friday at these times. And so, again, make sure to follow along if you're so interested. And, again, thank you to all those that helped put this program on. We had all the interns out working on this today. We had all of our staff here working on it, and we had all of the volunteers out on the cams working to make this go really well. So thank you to everyone involved making this happen. Again, my name is Spencer. Happy to be doing the broadcast. You're going to be hearing some new voices soon as the interns are now here and they're getting trained. So they're going to be taking over a lot of the programs here. So get ready for some new voices and some new faces as we get through the summer. Thank you, everyone that came here today, all of the guests that are here. You all had to pay an admission price to be here. We're very appreciative of that, especially as a nonprofit. Thank you so much for being willing and wanting to spend part of your day with us here at the North American Bear Center. It is greatly appreciated. I know the Bears can't thank you themselves, so I will do it on their behalf. Whether they outwardly expressed it or not, they are happy to see you because to them, guests means treats. And so, again, they are very happy to see you today, folks. With that, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. We hope everybody tuning in online and here at the center has a great rest of their day, and thanks so much for supporting the North American Bear Center. We'll see you next time at 12:30.